to touch my mom!
The little girl screamed, "Stop beating my mother!" And the wicked Mafias turned. On that day, rain pounded the tin roof like 1,000 fists, each strike echoing through the small wooden farmhouse at the edge of the Montana plains. Wind clawed at the shutters, lightning flared white against the window glass. Inside, 3 men loomed over Clara Miller, their shadows jerking across the walls every time the light flashed. The living room looked as though a hurricane had passed through. The lamp on the side table lay broken, its oil pooling on the floor. A family photograph, Clara, her husband James, and their little girl Lily, was cracked down the center. Clara's breath came in gasps. She tried to crawl backward, one hand clutching the edge of the torn rug, but a heavy boot pinned her wrist. "Where's the money?" one of the men shouted over the roar of the storm. He was tall, his coat dripping rain, the brim of his hat casting his eyes in shadow. "You think we came all the way out here for nothing?" "I told you," Clara sobbed. "I don't have it. Please, I have a child." Another man cut her off with a kick to her side. "Your husband owed the boss 15 grand. He's dead, so now it's on you." The third thug, younger than the others, bent down and yanked her head up by the hair. "You hear that thunder?" he said, his breath sour with whiskey. "That's the sound of the clock running out." Clara winced, biting back a scream. Every nerve in her body screamed for mercy, but she knew better than to beg. Begging only made them laugh. Lightning ripped across the sky again, and for an instant she saw her reflection in the shattered mirror, blood on her cheek, eyes wide, jaw trembling. James's face flickered in her mind, the way he used to smile at her from across the fields, the smell of soil on his hands, the promise that everything would be all right. She had believed him then. But belief didn't stop the storm. The men argued among themselves, their voices rough and impatient. "Boss says if she can't pay, take something she'll miss," one said. "Maybe the kid," another answered, grinning through his broken teeth. Clara's stomach turned to ice. "No," she cried. "Leave her out of this." A sharp slap cut her plea short. The room spun. She tasted blood. The front door burst open with a crash loud enough to drown even the thunder. The wind blew the curtains straight into the air, and rain sprayed across the floorboards. A small figure stood in the doorway, barefoot, drenched, breathing hard. "Stop!" the child screamed. All 3 men turned at once. The youngest snorted. "What the?" It was Lily. Her dress clung to her knees, her hair dripped water onto the floor. She had run all the way from the neighbor's farm where her mother had sent her for vegetables, following the screams that ripped through the storm. Her basket fell from her hand, potatoes rolling across the room. "Leave my mother alone," she shouted again, voice trembling but fierce. The men exchanged glances and the oldest laughed first. "You lost, little one?" Lily's fists clenched at her sides. "You already killed my dad," she said, her words catching in her throat. "Now you're hurting my mom." The laughter died. For a heartbeat even the storm seemed to hold its breath. "How does she know?" the younger thug muttered. Clara tried to reach for her daughter. "Lily, please." But the child took a step forward. Her fear was still there, but it was burning into something else, something raw and bright. "Let her go," she whispered. "Please." The tall man sneered. "Go wait outside before you get hurt." When he raised his hand toward her, the lamp flame flickered blue. The air grew heavy, thick enough to taste. A low hum filled the room like wind trapped in a bottle. Lily's eyes lifted to meet his, and they were no longer brown. They glowed, a deep red light that pulsed like the heart of the storm. "What the man began, but his words cut off. His body jerked backward as though yanked by invisible ropes. The others reached for him and were thrown back too, hitting the wall with a crack of wood and bone. The room exploded in noise, the lamp shattered, glass flew, lightning split the sky again. Clara froze. "Lily?" she whispered. Her voice barely carried over the storm. The girl stood motionless, eyes blazing, hands trembling in the air. The wind outside screamed through the open door, lifting her hair like a halo of flame. For a second the whole world seemed to hang between 2 heartbeats, the mother's fear and the daughter's power. Then the thunder struck and everything went dark. 6 years earlier, before the storm, before the screaming and the fear, the Miller house was filled with laughter. The sun used to shine across the open fields of northern Montana, and James Miller worked from dawn until the stars came out. He was a farmer, strong and quiet, with soil always caught under his nails. His wife, Clara, took care of their small daughter, Lily, a bright, smiling child who loved to run barefoot through the tall grass. Then one winter morning everything changed. Lily caught a cough that would not go away. Within a week her small body grew weak, she could hardly breathe. The local doctor came, listened to her chest and shook his head. He said the girl needed special medicine and hospital care far away in the city. The treatment would cost more money than James had ever seen in his life. James sat at the edge of the bed that night, holding his daughter's tiny hand. Her skin burned with fever. Clara sat beside him, crying quietly. "She's all we have," she whispered. James nodded, but his heart was heavy. He had already sold 2 cows and the spare tractor. There was nothing left to sell. Outside, the wind blew hard across the empty fields, carrying the sound of his worry into the dark. The next day he went into town looking for help. The bank refused him. His friends had little money themselves. By evening someone whispered a name, Vincent Mazzini. Everyone in town knew that name. The Mazzini family owned the bars, the trucking company, and half the police. People said Vincent's money came with a shadow that never left you once you took it. James tried not to listen to his fear. He told himself that a father must do anything to save his child. So he walked to the small restaurant behind the gas station where Mazzini often met people. The back room smelled of smoke and whiskey. Vincent Mazzini sat behind a table, wearing a dark suit even though it was daytime. His gold ring flashed when he tapped his fingers. "You're the farmer from the South Road," Vincent said. "What do you want?" "My daughter is sick," James answered. "She needs treatment. I'll pay you back after the next harvest." Vincent smiled, slow and thin. "How much?" "5,000. Vincent poured himself a drink. "5,000 now. 15 if you can't pay in a year. You sure you want that kind of promise?" James swallowed hard. He thought of Lily's pale face, the sound of her weak breath. "Yes," he said. "I'll pay. I swear I will." Vincent handed him a brown envelope filled with cash. "Then we have a deal, farmer. Don't forget who helped you when no one else would." James thanked him and left. The wind outside smelled like rain, but he felt light for the first time in weeks. That night he gave the money to Clara. They drove Lily to the hospital and within a few days the medicine began to work. The color returned to her cheeks, she smiled again. James called it a miracle. Clara called it God's mercy. Neither of them said the word Mazzini. For a while life was peaceful again. Lily grew stronger. She followed James around the fields, pretending to plant seeds beside him. But the next summer brought drought. The soil turned to dust and the corn died before it reached his knees. The barn stood half empty, and the bills came faster than the rain. Then the visits began. A black car would appear at the edge of the field. 2 men in dark coats would step out, lean on the fence and wait until James came over. They smiled but their eyes were cold. "The boss doesn't like waiting," they would say. "You got his money yet?" James tried to explain that the harvest had failed, that he only needed more time. They would laugh, slap him on the shoulder too hard and drive away. Each visit left him smaller inside. He started avoiding town, afraid of seeing them again. Months passed. The interest doubled. They came at night now, knocking on the door when Lily was asleep. Clara would hold James's arm as he faced them on the porch. The men would speak softly, but their words carried poison. "You don't want the boss angry," one said. "Bad things happen to people who forget their debts." Fear settled over the farmhouse like fog. James stopped sleeping. He worked harder than ever, trying to save every penny, but the math never worked. The debt grew faster than his crops. Every sunset felt heavier, every sound on the road made him turn his head. Sometimes he would stand at Lily's doorway watching her sleep. He would whisper, "I'll fix it, sweetheart. I promise." But deep down he knew the promise was slipping away. Outside, the sky turned red with another dry summer evening. The air smelled of dust and worry. James looked toward the horizon where the town lights glimmered faintly, and he wondered if the man in the dark suit was already thinking about him again. The fire that would one day change everything was still quiet then, hidden inside the heart of a little girl who only wanted her family safe. But trouble was already walking toward their door. The first year passed and James still had not paid Vincent Mazzini back. Every dollar he earned vanished into food, repairs, and the hospital bills still left from Lily's sickness. The second year began with another drought. The corn failed again, the ground cracked open beneath the heat. Dust coated everything, the porch steps, the dishes, even the photographs of better days. Each month a black car rolled down the dirt road toward the farmhouse. Mazzini's men would step out, clean shoes sinking slightly into the dry soil. "Afternoon, farmer," one would say, always smiling, always polite in the way a snake is polite before it strikes. "Just checking in." The boss asked if you've got his money yet. James always said the same thing. "I'm working on it." Just need a little more time. Time costs money, the taller man would answer, and then they would leave him with that sentence hanging in the air like smoke. Clara hated those visits. She tried to send Lily outside when she saw the car coming, but the child was clever and curious. Sometimes she hid behind the kitchen door and listened. She didn't understand all the words, interest, deadline, collateral, but she understood the fear in her mother's voice. At night, James would sit on the porch steps staring at the empty fields. Next season, he told Clara, next season will be better. But his voice no longer sounded like hope, it sounded like prayer. Then came the warnings. A window broken one morning for no reason. A dead crow nailed to the barn door. Clara found a letter under a rock by the gate. You forget too long, we remember for you. She burned it before Lily could see. Still, the girls sensed that something dark had settled over their home. James worked harder, rising before dawn and coming home long after sunset. He grew thinner, his hands blistered raw. Sometimes he coughed blood into the sink when he thought no one was watching. He refused to give up, but the debt grew faster than any crop could match. One evening he loaded a small wagon with corn, hoping to sell it in town. The sky was turning purple. Thunderheads were building in the west. Clara asked him to wait until morning, but he shook his head. The buyers come early. If I don't go now, someone else will get the price. He kissed her cheek, ruffled Lily's hair and said, I'll be back before it rains. The wagon creaked down the dirt road, wheels bumping over the stones. Clara watched until he vanished beyond the trees. The wind carried a faint smell of storm and dust. Night fell fully before James finished his sales. The money he earned was small, barely enough to feed them another week, but it was something. He pocketed the bills and began the long walk home. The road was empty except for the rustle of dry grass and the buzz of insects. Far off, lightning flashed without thunder. Then headlights appeared behind him. A car slowed to match his pace. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The door opened with a squeal. Evenin', farmer, a voice said. Boss sent us for a chat. James tried to keep walking. Tell him he'll have his money soon. Oh, he's heard that before, another voice answered. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Problem is, he doesn't believe it anymore. The first punch knocked the breath from him. He staggered, dropped his bag. Another blow came, then another. He tried to shield his face, but there were too many of them. Boots slammed into his ribs. He tasted blood, saw flashes of light that might have been lightning or stars bursting behind his eyes. Please, he gasped. My wife, my daughter. A kick to the chest silenced him. One of the men spat on the ground. Should have thought of them before you borrowed money you couldn't pay. When they were finished, James lay in the dirt barely breathing. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. One of the men crouched beside him and pinned a piece of paper to his torn shirt with a small metal clip. The words were written in thick black ink. Pay back or we come for your family. They left him there, headlights fading into the storm. The rain turned the dust to mud. James tried to move, tried to crawl toward the fence line, but his strength bled out faster than the water running past him. He thought of Clara's face, of Lily laughing in the fields. He tried to say their names, but the words drowned in his throat. By dawn the storm had passed. A neighbor riding to town saw the wagon first, abandoned by the side of the road. Then he saw the body lying in the mud. He ran to the farmhouse, shouting for help. Clara came running barefoot through the wet grass, her dress clinging to her knees. When she saw James, she fell beside him, crying his name over and over. Lily stood behind her, holding onto the doorway, too young to understand but old enough to feel the world breaking. The sheriff came later, took notes, shook his head, and said quietly that there was nothing he could do without witnesses. The note was taken as evidence, but everyone knew it would disappear before morning. The black car still ruled the county roads. That night, Clara sat beside her husband's empty chair, staring at the lamp until the oil burned out. Outside the fields lay silent. Only the wind moved, whispering over the land like a voice repeating promises no one could keep. The news came with the sunrise. A neighbor, hat in hand, stood at the doorway, his boots still muddy from the road. Behind him, the sheriff's car idled in the yard. Clara already knew before he spoke. The look on his face told her everything. Mrs. Miller, he said softly, we found James last night, out by the south road. Her heart stopped. The room spun. No, she whispered. No, he said he'd be back before the rain. The man didn't answer. He only handed her a folded blanket. Inside was James's jacket, torn and stained dark with blood. The smell of the earth clung to it. Clara's knees gave way. She fell to the floor, clutching the jacket to her chest, her cries breaking the quiet of the morning. Lily ran from her room, still half asleep. Mama? What's wrong? Clara couldn't speak. She could only hold the jacket tighter, rocking back and forth. The sheriff murmured something about an accident, but his voice faded into the distance. Nothing reached her. The world had gone hollow. The rest of the day passed in silence. Neighbors came and went, leaving food she couldn't touch. The doctor stopped by, offered her something to help her sleep. She refused. Sleep meant closing her eyes and seeing James lying there again. When night came, she sat by the window and waited for a light that never appeared on the road. The chair beside her bed stayed empty. The wind outside moaned through the eaves like a voice she almost recognized. By midnight, the tears had stopped, but her chest still ached as if her heart were being squeezed by an invisible hand. She laid the jacket across her lap and traced the torn fabric with her fingers. "Why did you go alone?" she whispered. "Why didn't I stop you?" Lily came in quietly, dragging her small blanket behind her. "Mama, where's Daddy?" Clara forced a smile that broke halfway. "He's gone to be with God, sweetheart. He's watching over us now." The child frowned. "But he said he'd take me fishing." Clara turned away so Lily wouldn't see her face. "He still will," she said softly. "Someday." When Lily finally fell asleep in her arms, Clara stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The rain started again, tapping against the roof. Every drop sounded like a memory. James laughing, James calling her name, James telling her everything would be all right. Morning came gray and cold. The sheriff returned with a short, empty report. "No witnesses," he said. "No evidence." He placed a single piece of paper on the table, the note they had found pinned to James's shirt. "Pay back or we come for your family." Clara read the words once, twice, until they blurred into nothing. She folded the note and locked it inside a small wooden box where Lily couldn't find it. Then she went outside and stared at the fields. The soil looked dead. The wind carried no scent of rain now, only dust. Days turned into weeks. Clara did her best to keep the farm alive. She fed the chickens, mended fences, and tried to smile for Lily. But the laughter that used to fill the house was gone. Every sound seemed too loud, every silence too deep. At night she knelt by the bed and prayed aloud. "Lord, give me strength," she said. "I don't know how to do this without him." The letters began soon after. Slipped under the door, left in the mailbox, sometimes pinned to the fence post. Each one was short and cruel. "Time's up. You can't hide forever. Your husband's debt is now yours." Every time she saw the handwriting, her hands shook. She burned most of the notes in the stove, watching the paper curl and blacken. But a few she hid away in a drawer, unable to destroy the proof that this nightmare was real. Whenever Lily asked about the envelopes, Clara forced a smile. "It's just a bill, sweetheart," she would say. "Nothing important." Then she would send her daughter outside to play, pretending everything was normal while her heart raced in her chest. The nights were the worst. Every gust of wind made her think of footsteps. Every creak of the floor made her imagine the sound of boots on the porch. She kept the oil lamp burning until morning because darkness felt like an open door for evil to step through. One evening she found Lily sitting on the floor with one of the burned envelopes. The child had pulled it from the ashes. "Mama, why are you burning Daddy's letters?" she asked. Clara knelt beside her, tears rising again. "They're not from Daddy, love. Daddy wouldn't write those." She took the girl's hands in hers. "You just remember the good things about him, all right? His stories, his laugh, how much he loved us." Lily nodded slowly, her eyes big and solemn. "I remember." When the child went to bed, Clara stood by the window again. The sky outside was streaked with lightning far away, silent and distant. She thought of James, his promises, his tired smile, his blood on that old jacket, and she whispered into the glass, "I'll keep her safe. I swear I will." But deep inside she wasn't sure how. Fear had settled over the house like a shadow that would not lift, a shadow that waited for the next knock on the door. The afternoon began quiet. The air was heavy with the smell of rain, the kind that waits on the edge of the clouds and refuses to fall. Clara sent Lily to the neighbor's field to fetch a few vegetables for supper. "Don't stay long, sweetheart," she said. "The sky looks angry." Lily nodded and ran down the dirt path barefoot, humming to herself. She liked visiting the old Thompson farm because their garden grew better than hers and Mrs. Thompson always gave her a cookie for the walk back. The girl filled her small basket with corn and potatoes, waved goodbye, and started home as the first rumble of thunder rolled across the hills. Halfway down the road she heard it, a faint sound carried by the wind. At first she thought it was thunder again, but then she heard it clearly, her mother's voice, sharp and frightened, crying for help. Lily froze. The basket slipped from her fingers and hit the ground, scattering vegetables across the mud. "Mama," she whispered. Then she ran. The closer she came to the farmhouse, the louder the noise grew, crashing, shouting, the dull thud of boots on wood. Her small heart pounded in her chest. The front door was wide open, banging against the wall with every gust of wind. When she stepped inside, she saw them. 3 men in dark coats stood over her mother. Clara lay on the floor, her face bruised, her arms raised to shield herself. One man kicked her side, another overturned the small table. The third leaned against the wall, smiling as if he were watching a show. "Stop!" Lily screamed, her voice breaking. "Leave her alone." All 3 men turned at once. The tallest laughed. "Well, look who's home," he said. "The boss said the kid was cute." Clara tried to rise, but one of them pushed her back down. "Don't you touch her," she cried. The youngest thug crouched down until his face was level with Lily's. "Your mother owes us, kid," he said. "She pays or she dies. Simple." Lily's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "You already killed my dad." The words hit the air like a thunderclap. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Clara looked up, eyes wide in shock. "Lily," she whispered, "how did you know?" "I heard you crying," Lily said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You said it was nothing, but I knew. I knew they hurt him." The men exchanged glances and began to laugh. "Smart kid," one said. "Maybe she can tell us where the money is." "Let her be," Lily shouted. "She's innocent." "Or what?" the man closest to her sneered. "You gonna stop us?" Lightning flashed through the window, lighting the room in white for an instant. The wind roared, blowing papers and curtains into the air. Lily took a small step forward. Her hands shook, but her eyes didn't leave them. "Please," she whispered, "just go away." The tall man raised his hand to strike her. "Get out of the way, brat." And then it happened. The sound came first, a deep, low hum that filled the room. The lamp flame flickered and stretched tall, turning from yellow to red. The air grew thick, pressing against the walls like a living thing. Clara gasped as the men froze mid-step, confusion twisting their faces. Lily's tears stopped. Her breathing slowed. The glow began in her eyes, faint at first, then brighter, burning like coals. The men stared, uncertain, backing away. "What's wrong with her eyes?" one whispered. "Grab her," shouted another. But none of them could move fast enough. The wind burst through the open door, slamming it shut with a crack. The floorboards trembled under their boots. Lily raised her hands, palms out. A force unseen but heavy filled the air. The men lifted off the floor as if yanked by invisible ropes. Their arms flailed, legs kicking in panic. Clara crawled to the corner, eyes wide with terror and awe. "Lily, stop," she cried. The child's voice was calm now, almost quiet. "You hurt my father," she said. "You hurt my mother." She dropped her hands. The men crashed to the floor with a noise that shook the windows. They groaned, trying to rise. One reached for a gun, but it slid across the floor before he could grab it. He looked at his trembling hands and whispered, "What is she?" Lily stood still, her eyes glowing brighter with every breath. The wind outside howled as thunder cracked above the roof. Her small frame seemed to shine in the dim light, a figure of both fear and power. The tallest man crawled toward the door. "Let's get out of here," he gasped. The others followed, stumbling over each other, tripping on broken furniture. They fled into the storm, leaving the house in ruins. When they were gone, Lily blinked and the red faded from her eyes. She swayed on her feet. Clara rushed forward and caught her before she fell. "Sweetheart," she whispered, holding the girl close. "What just happened?" Lily looked up, exhausted. "I don't know, Mama," she said softly. "I just wanted them to stop." The storm outside finally broke open, rain pounding on the roof like the beat of 1,000 drums. Mother and daughter sat together in the wrecked room, the sound of the rain washing away the last of the men's laughter. Neither of them knew it yet, but the fire that had awakened inside Lily that day would change everything. The room was a storm of noise and fear. Rain slammed against the windows and thunder rolled over the fields. Lily stood in the middle of the wrecked farmhouse, her bare feet planted firmly on the wooden floor. Her small frame shook, but her eyes did not move from the men before her. Something inside her chest began to burn, a strange heat rising, spreading through her arms and into her fingertips. The nearest man staggered toward her, snarling. "You little brat," he shouted. "You think you can scare us?" He raised his hand as if to strike her. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then the light in the room changed. The small lamp on the table flickered and turned deep crimson, throwing long, twisting shadows across the walls. The smell of metal and smoke filled the air. The man stopped mid-step, eyes wide. What the? Lily's body trembled as the fire inside her grew stronger. Her tears had dried, but her face still glistened with the storm's reflection. "Leave my mother alone," she whispered. Her voice came out deeper than before, carrying a strange echo that didn't sound like a child at all. The men froze. The air grew heavy, pressing against them like invisible hands. The younger thug tried to speak, but no sound came. His throat tightened. The floor beneath them groaned. Clara watched from the corner, hands over her mouth, too afraid to move. Lily's eyes burst into color, deep, glowing red like molten metal. The glow filled the room, lighting every corner, every drop of rain that fell through the broken window. She lifted her hands slowly, palms facing upward. The men's bodies lifted off the ground as if pulled by unseen ropes. Their boots scraped the walls, their fingers clawing at the air. One tried to shout but only choked on his own breath. The sound of cracking wood filled the house as furniture rattled and the curtains tore free from the windows. Clara screamed, "Lily, stop. You'll kill them." Lily's voice shook but did not break. "They killed my father. They hurt you. They deserve it." She brought her hands down sharply. The men crashed to the floor with a thud that shook the walls. Groaning, they tried to crawl away, but Lily lifted them again. Their bodies rose higher this time, hitting the ceiling before dropping once more. The floorboards splintered under their weight. She raised her hands a third time. Her face was pale, her hair whipping around her like fire caught in the wind. The third fall left the men barely conscious. They lay twisted and gasping, staring up at the girl who stood over them. Then from outside, a voice cut through the sound of rain. "What's going on in there?" The front door creaked open. A tall figure stepped inside. Vincent Mazzini himself, dressed in his black coat and hat, water dripping from the brim. His cold eyes scanned the wreckage, the bodies of his men on the floor, and the small girl standing among them like a ghost made of light. He took one step forward. "Who are you?" he demanded. Lily turned her blazing eyes toward him. "I'm the daughter of the man your men beat and left to die," she said quietly. "I'm the daughter of the man you killed." For the first time Mazzini hesitated. No, that's impossible." He lunged forward, reaching for her arm. The moment his hand came close, a burst of force threw him backward as if struck by lightning. He slammed into the wall, his hat flying off. He tried again, shouting in anger, and the same power hurled him across the room a second time. The impact rattled the door from its hinges. He lay there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the girl who stood calm and unmoving. Fear crept into his voice. "What are you?" Lily lowered her hands. The red in her eyes began to fade. "I'm his daughter," she said softly. "And he's still here." The men scrambled to their feet, stumbling toward the door. "Let's go," one shouted. "She's not human." They rushed out into the rain, dragging their wounded boss with them. The sound of their footsteps faded into the storm. Inside the house, only the sound of rain remained. Lily's strength left her all at once and she sank to her knees. Clara ran to her, wrapping her in trembling arms. Together they sat in the wrecked room, mother and daughter, while the storm raged outside. The storm began to fade, leaving only the steady whisper of rain on the tin roof. The house was a wreck, broken furniture scattered across the floor, glass glittering like ice, and the sharp smell of smoke still hanging in the air. Clara sat in the middle of it all, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter. Lily's small body trembled once, then went limp against her chest. "Lily? Sweetheart, open your eyes," Clara whispered. The girl's lashes fluttered, revealing her brown eyes again. The glow was gone, leaving only the soft, frightened gaze of a child. "It's all right," Clara murmured, rocking her gently. "You're safe now. It's over." Outside, thunder rolled away into the distance. The wind had calmed, but the rain continued to fall in long, tired sheets, washing the blood and dirt from the porch. The world seemed to breathe again, though the air still felt heavy, as if it remembered the fear that had filled it moments before. Lily stirred weakly. "Mama," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Did I do something bad?" Clara's throat tightened. "No, baby," she said softly. "You saved me. That's all that matters." The girl closed her eyes again, her breathing slowing. Clara pressed her forehead to her daughter's hair and began to cry, quiet tears that came from relief, grief, and disbelief all mixed together. She didn't know what she had just witnessed. She only knew that her child had done something no human should be able to do. Hours passed before the first knock came at the door. Clara jumped. Her heart began to race again, but the voice outside was familiar. Clara? It's Tom Thompson. You all right? She hesitated, then stood still holding Lily. Tom? She called back. Come in. The neighbor stepped through the doorway, his coat soaked, his eyes wide as he looked around the ruined room. Behind him, a few other neighbors gathered, whispering. We heard screams, Tom said. Then the whole sky lit up red. What happened here? Clara couldn't find the words. She shook her head slowly. They came, she said at last. The men who killed James. They came for the money. Tom's face hardened. And where are they now? Clara looked toward the open door where the rain still fell in silver lines. Gone, she said simply. They won't be back. Tom stepped further into the room, staring at the overturned chairs and splintered floorboards. Looks like a tornado hit this place, he muttered. You sure you're both all right? I think so, she said. Just tired. He nodded, glancing at Lily's sleeping face. Poor child. We'll help you clean up in the morning. He turned to leave but paused. Clara, people are going to talk. You know that, right? I know. Her voice was steady but her hands still shook. Let them talk. By morning the rain had stopped, and the sun rose weakly through the clouds. The fields shimmered with water. Word had already begun to spread through the county, about the night the Mafia came for Clara Miller and never came back. Some said the thugs had been struck by lightning. Others said they'd seen fire inside the house, fire that moved like a living thing. Everyone agreed on one thing. Something strange had happened at the Miller farm. The sheriff came to ask questions. Clara told him the truth, or at least part of it. 3 men broke in, she said. There was a fight. Then they ran away. I don't know where they went. The sheriff looked at her for a long time, then nodded and closed his notebook. You call if they come back, he said. When he left, Clara sat on the porch watching Lily play with her doll in the muddy yard. The child looked normal again, smiling, quiet, the same little girl she had always been. But Clara couldn't shake the memory of those eyes, glowing red in the dark. That night, after putting Lily to bed, she sat alone by the window. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels too deep to trust. She thought about the power she had seen, the fear on the men's faces, the strength that had come from somewhere beyond this world. Was it a gift? A curse? Or something else entirely? Clara didn't know. She only knew that something had changed forever. The wind moved gently through the open window, brushing her cheek. It felt almost like a hand, James's hand, soft, protective, and full of love. Watch over her, she whispered into the night. Please watch over her. The rain began again, softly this time, and the farmhouse, though scarred and broken, stood strong beneath it. The days after the storm passed slowly, each one quieter than the last. The world outside seemed normal again. Birds sang in the fields and the morning light returned, but inside Clara Miller's heart, nothing felt the same. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night and think she saw James's shadow standing by the window. She would blink and it would be gone, but the feeling of his presence always lingered. One afternoon, while cleaning the storage room, Clara found an old wooden chest pushed into the corner beneath a sheet. It was covered in dust, the hinges rusted from years of rain seeping through the roof. She knelt beside it, brushing off the dirt with her sleeve. It was James's chest, the one he had brought from his father's house when they were first married. She hadn't opened it in years. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a few folded clothes, a broken pocket watch, and a bundle of yellowed letters tied together with string. She picked one up carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably James's, but the letter wasn't addressed to her. It was to someone named Samuel Miller, his father. The first words made her breath catch. Father, the fire still runs in me. I try to live a quiet life, but sometimes I feel it when I'm angry or afraid. You told me it would fade, but it hasn't. I worry what will happen if it ever wakes. Clara frowned. The fire still runs in me. She read further, her eyes moving quickly over the faded ink. James had written about his grandfather, a man the townsfolk once called the Fire Blood. He was a farmer like them but also a protector. Someone who could summon light and heat from within himself when danger threatened his family. People feared him and respected him in equal measure. When he died, the stories faded into legend. Clara turned to another letter, written just a few months before James's death. Sometimes I see it in Lily's eyes, he had written. That spark. Maybe she carries more of it than I do. I pray it stays asleep. This world isn't kind to people with fire in their blood. Clara set the letter down slowly, her hands shaking. She looked toward the doorway where Lily was playing with her doll, humming softly to herself. The truth settled in her chest like a weight and a warmth all at once. The night James died, something greater than love had tied him to them. His spirit hadn't left, it had clung to the ones he loved most. Later that evening, Clara sat on the porch, reading the rest of the letters as the sun sank behind the hills. Each one told a piece of the same story, a family line marked by strength, sacrifice, and a mysterious flame that awakened only in moments of great love or danger. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about protection. She remembered the night of the attack, the red light filling the room, the warmth that had wrapped around her like a shield. It hadn't felt cold or cruel. It had felt like James. His presence, his courage, his will to protect them no matter what. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered into the fading light, "It was you, wasn't it?" A gentle wind stirred the air, lifting the pages of the letters. The last rays of sunlight flared bright for a moment, glinting off the old pocket watch in the chest. For just an instant the air shimmered, and Clara thought she saw a figure standing at the edge of the yard, tall, familiar, smiling. Then the light faded and he was gone. That night, Clara tucked the letters back into the chest and locked it carefully. She didn't tell Lily what she had found, not yet. Some truths, she decided, revealed themselves when the time was right. But in her heart, she finally understood the power that had saved them. The fire inside Lily wasn't born of hate or revenge. It was James's love, alive, burning, and unbreakable. It was the part of him that refused to die, the part that would always stand between his family and the darkness. As Clara blew out the lamp and climbed into bed beside her sleeping daughter, she felt no fear for the first time in months. The fire that lived in their house now was gentle, warm, and watchful. It was love made living again. Months turned into seasons, and the world outside the Miller farm began to heal. The fields grew green again, and the air no longer carried the stench of fear. Yet beneath that quiet surface, the name Mazzina still held power. Vincent Mazzina's reach stretched through every corner of the county, through the sheriff's office, the mayor's desk, even the banks and businesses. No one dared to speak against him. Everyone had learned the same bitter lesson. Silence was survival. Then one spring morning, a new name appeared on the county signs. Robert Hayes, the newly appointed county chief. He was younger than most expected, a man with clear eyes and a soldier's posture. He had grown up in the neighboring town, and people said he'd returned because he was tired of seeing honest families crushed under dirty power. His first act in office was simple but bold. He reopened the old case files that had been gathering dust for years. Within weeks, word spread that the Mazzina family was under investigation. At first, people didn't believe it. "They own the law," someone whispered at the market. "They'll shut him down before he gets close." But Hayes didn't back down. He brought in new deputies, men and women from outside the county who owed Mazzini nothing. He asked questions that no one had dared to ask in decades. And slowly, quietly, the walls began to crack. One brave voice spoke first. A shopkeeper from town told the police about the weekly payments he'd been forced to make to keep his business open. Then a farmer came forward, describing how his son had been beaten for missing a deadline on a debt. One testimony led to another, each story fueling the next. It was as if the county had been holding its breath for years and now, finally, it could exhale. The sheriff who had once looked away resigned suddenly, claiming health reasons. The mayor stopped showing up to council meetings. Every day the newspapers printed a new headline: "Mafia under fire, new chief cleans house, victims speak out." When Clara Miller's name appeared on the list of witnesses, her heart nearly stopped. For days she couldn't sleep. She paced the kitchen, reading and rereading the letter. "You have been called to testify in the case of the state versus Vincent Mazzini." She didn't want to relive that night. She didn't want to remember the sound of James's voice fading into the rain or the sight of those men standing over her. But she knew she had to. For James. For Lily. For every family that had lost someone to the same cruelty. The courthouse was full when she arrived. Reporters lined the steps. Cameras flashed. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and tension. The Mazzina men sat at a long table with their lawyers, their expensive suits doing little to hide the fear creeping into their eyes. And there, at the end of the row, sat Vincent himself, older now, the lines on his face carved deep by arrogance and time. When Clara took the stand, her hands trembled. The judge nodded to her gently. "Mrs. Miller, please tell the court what happened." She drew in a slow breath. "My husband borrowed money from Vincent Mazzini to save our daughter's life," she began. Her voice wavered, but she did not stop. She told them everything: the threats, the beatings, the night James didn't come home, the note left on his chest. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of pens. When she finished, she glanced toward the defense table. Vincent met her eyes for only a second before looking away. Then other witnesses came forward, one after another, their stories weaving a web of guilt that could no longer be denied. A mechanic who had lost his shop. A widow whose husband had vanished. Even a former Matsina driver who confessed to burning evidence. Each voice added another stone to the mountain of truth. By the end of the week, the evidence filled an entire table. Ledgers of bribes, photographs of crime scenes, recordings of threats. The jury's faces grew harder with every passing hour. The courtroom buzzed with whispers of hope, something that had not been spoken aloud in years. When Clara left the courthouse that evening, the sun was setting behind the hills. Reporters shouted questions, but she didn't answer. She only looked up at the orange sky and whispered, "James, it's happening. They're finally listening." For the first time since that terrible night, the county wasn't ruled by fear. The law had awakened. And justice, though long delayed, was finally on its way. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.